joining me, we have Dr. David Linzey, and we are going to be talking with him about a very important, very timely topic today, fleas and ticks. It is that time of year, isn't it?
It is. I'm going to try to be as excited about fleas and ticks as Megan just was about the summer concert series, but it's always something we get excited about around the summertime. And yeah, as we're kind of changing seasons and we're kind of getting into the warmer weather, today's dampness and everything, fleas and ticks love this kind of weather, and they really thrive in areas where it's warm and humid. So luckily we live in a part of the state that we don't have most people don't have a tremendous problem with fleas and ticks, but it's always one of those little nuisances for pet owners that always comes up during the summertime, and always something that good information for pet owners to have, just to be aware of kind of what's out there and what kind of problems they can possibly cause. So
definitely. So talk with us a little bit about some of the ways to protect your pet from these nasty little critters.
Sure, there's always new products coming out almost every year. Fleas probably are more of just a nuisance than anything, and we certainly see around this area, it seems like certain areas have a big flea problem and other areas don't have so much. But there are a number of effective flea products, and a lot of those are probably the ones that are recommended by veterinarians or sold as prescriptions.
Okay.
And those we feel like we have a little more experience with, and we know what the chemical is and how the product works and those kind of things. There are a long list of other over-the-counter products that people can purchase that may advertise as being the same as the prescription level, but they're really not. Some of them are the same chemicals, but not the same concentrations and things like that.
Okay.
When I was growing up, we used to do collars and dips and powders and those kind of things, and those have largely gone by the wayside now as more effective products have become available. And those are products that can be applied topically sometimes. And then there are also pills and chews, little things that dogs and cats both can take, make it a little bit easier to administer them, and most of them are very effective. So that's a good thing for not necessarily year-round in our area, but particularly during the summertime when the weather's warming up. That tends to be when the parasites tend to be a little more populous. So
right.
Ticks, on the other hand, not only are a nuisance, but actually can be a health concern. And fleas, by and large, don't carry anything dangerous that's really going to cause any major problems. Ticks, however, are well-known vectors or carriers of a number of different, we group them in the tick-transmitted disease category. And some of those that people have heard of are Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, just to name a couple of those. Dogs and sometimes cats are susceptible to all those same diseases. And they are probably a little more likely to be exposed to these organisms because they are out in the fields and the wooded areas and things like that where the ticks basically live.
Right.
So the concern for owners would be that our pets are the link between the wild animal population and us, and they oftentimes bring these ticks back into contact with us. And as most people know, things like Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lyme disease, those are diseases that do affect people. And the ticks are kind of the organism in common that we all have, that we share. And that's oftentimes can be a human health risk and can be a concern for us as well as the pets.
Definitely.
So, and a lot of these same products that we use for flea control also are effective for ticks. And there are always new products coming out every year. And some have a little perk about why they're a little bit better, and some that are given orally, some that are given topically, you know, all kinds of different type of preparations. But most of the prescription level medications generally are ones that we're a little more comfortable with as far as safety concerns, and also the fact that they work a whole lot better than some of the older treatment techniques that we used to use. So.
Definitely. And would you say that most of these newer products are more preventative, meaning that they're kind of a before the fleas and ticks get on the pet kind of deal, or is it more after the fact, then you treat it?
Yeah, the manufacturers of all these products have realized that most pet owners don't like to start a product and wait for about 3 months for them really to become fully effective. So most of them have an ingredient in them that is called an adulticide, which usually is fairly effective at quickly killing the fleas and the ticks, particularly the fleas, sometimes within as short as 30 minutes. The ticks are a little bit harder to kill, but most of those products work fairly effectively, and they've incorporated different ingredients that will take care of the adult version as well as all of the developing larval stages of those organisms as they develop. And we like to say that fleas, when you're seeing them on your pet, are just the adult version, and there are many, many, many times more of them in the environment than there are the adult fleas that you're actually seeing.
Oh, dear.
And that speaks a little bit for trying to kind of get ahead of that whole season, which we're
Right.
in right now. And this time of year is a good time, and we usually recommend people start thinking about flea and tick control and medication preventatives and things this time of year, just so they don't get to that point where they have an infestation and then have to go back afterwards and treat the dog, the house, the yard, the whole area in order
Right.
to kind of get everything under control. In some areas, and in some folks do have serious problems, even in our area. A lot of the student housing areas where there's a lot of dense population, a lot of people with a lot of pets, and they have a very small area of grass to kind of wander on, gets to be a common problem. And everybody, usually we would think that our winter times, being a little colder and a little harsher, would always probably put a dent a little bit in our flea and tick population, and it probably does, but we never have a year where we never see fleas and never see ticks. So it's always something that we deal with every year, and probably our weather here makes it a little less likely that we have terrible infestations, but they're still here. And we start seeing ticks usually around March.
Okay,
And,
it's a little early.
Springtime now is usually when the ticks become a little more commonplace, and then they kind of fade away as the summer gets warmer and hotter, and then the fleas usually become a little more common. So we have different seasons that we usually see them, usually during the course of the year. So.
Now, with a tick, how important is it to act very quickly if you do find a tick on your pet? What is your procedure need to be there?
Most of the time, if they are attached, and they've actually attached, then you need to probably make sure you can go ahead and remove the tick in its entirety. And there's all kinds of different ways to do that, and different gadgets and things that you can do that with. But basically, we just usually pinch them off and make sure that you're getting the whole tick off. And then we usually dispose of those in some way. And most of the products that we use nowadays are so effective at quickly kind of killing them that most of the time, hopefully, if you're finding these ticks, that they may still be attached, but they're dead. So that makes kind of cleaning them off a little bit easier. And brushing pets out too with a fine tooth comb, oftentimes, or a pet brush. Will allow you to pull some of those things out of the hair coat. And the little short hair guys are pretty easy to see them on, but some of these longer haired dogs, particularly that are dark colored, can be tricky to kind of de-tick if they've been out in an area where they the ticks tend to congregate. And that's usually fields, big grassy fields. Ticks like to hang out on those big tall grass blades, and they just wait for an animal passing by to latch onto. And that's how deer ticks work. Deer ticks are different than what most people see, which are the dog tick varieties.
Right.
But the deer ticks are the ones that tend to carry the worst sort of diseases. But most of the flea and tick medications are effective at all those different species. So.
Okay. So are there particular areas that you should avoid? I know in the summer when Kelsey and I go hiking or to a waterfall, we tend to take Mocha along with us, but are there certain places that maybe it's better to leave the dog at home?
I mean, typically when we go out hiking and walking, you can really tell a big difference between the wooded areas and the grassy areas. And the ticks are not very fond of the wooded areas. So if you're really trying to kind of protect yourselves in that regard, then usually staying in the wooded areas is a much better area. You get out in the open fields, and particularly those tall grass areas, and as they're running through the grass and sniffing and following trails and things like that, those ticks are just hanging out in there waiting for a host to come by. And that's where largely, I know my dogs, when we go out walking or hiking, as soon as you get back out of the grassy fields, then you're pretty much out of tick territory, but it's those grassy areas that tend to harbor the majority of the ticks. So.
Okay, gotcha. And then once you are outside with your pet, I know when we come back, a lot of times we'll go ahead and give Mocha a bath right away. Is that a good idea to do?
You can, if they're already on a medication prior to going out into those areas. There's not really any products that'll effectively just kind of repel them and not allow them to actually get on them at all.
Right.
So you'll still see them walking on the animal's coat and things like that, where they're pretty easy to kind of pick off. And bathing would probably remove them from that area. It's really that attachment that is the problem, and that's how disease transmission happens. And it usually takes a period of time from the time the ticks are attached to the time that process occurs. So the goal is to try to get those ticks off of there before that transmission time passes. And that's where most of the medications are pretty good at kind of getting them effectively killed off before they have a chance to transmit some of those diseases. So.
Definitely. And with these medications, or really any medication for your pet, is it very important to kind of keep an eye on them, see if there are any symptoms or?
Sure, just like with any medication, and these products are all tested and verified to be safe, whether it's a topical medication, which usually tends to stay on the outside of the pet, or whether it's oral medication that's given by mouth and then is absorbed, through the bloodstream and systemically. But any dog or cat can react to any different medication just like people do. And it's certainly worth keeping an eye on them, particularly if you're starting a new product or if you're switching to a different type of product, to make sure that they tolerate it well. And usually if they do okay with the first dose, then subsequent dosing. Most of these products are used monthly, so you do it about every 30 days. And most of the time, if they tolerate it okay on the first go-around, then generally they'll be okay for the duration of the time. And most people treat for fleas and ticks in our area probably through October-ish or so. And that usually gets us through the worst of that season. So, and then you're usually okay during the winter. Some people still see fleas during the winter time. It just depends on your area and where you are and those kind of things. So.
Kind of like mosquitoes for us in the summer. Just one of those little
summer
things that isn't our favorite.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and mosquitoes transmit heartworms, a whole different discussion. And luckily, we don't have a huge amount of mosquitoes due to our location, and that does put a damper on the number of heartworm cases that we see here too. So we're fortunate in a number of ways as far as some of these different things that pet owners have to deal with. So.
Absolutely. Well, you've given us a lot of great advice as always. If any of our pet owners do have an issue with fleas and ticks this summer, remind us how to get in touch with you and where your office is.
Sure. Our office is on Highway 105 across from the water wheel, and our phone number is 828-268-2833, and there is somebody there 24 hours a day. We're a 24-hour emergency and critical care clinic as well as a regular day practice. So we do carry a variety of flea and tick products for both dogs and cats, and can take care of all those problems if you have any issues in that area. So.
All right, so any problems, get in touch with Dr. Linzey.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for coming in to share with us today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Of course, and we will be back right after these messages with more of the Mountain Television Network.